In a Harris poll, adults were asked if they are in favor of abolishing the penny. 1222 answered no, 487 yes, 358 no opinion. What is the sample proportion of yes? So in yes, you divide the yes count by the total count. So let's see what the total count is. 1222 plus 487 is 1709 plus 358 is 2067. So the total count is 2067 and 487 answered yes. So 487 divided by 2067. 0.2356. And the symbol they use for the sample proportion is p hat. Although we should not have emphasized on this, because there is actually one problem in this course where they forget that they're using p hat and they just use p for it. But most of the time they use p hat for sample proportion. A p-value. So now this p is uppercase p. It's different from the lowercase p. So the lowercase p in proportion stats is used for the population proportion, whereas the uppercase p has a different meaning. Remember a while ago we talked about alpha being the type 1 error, probability of type 1 error. It's actually the probability of the allowable type 1 error. So let's make a note of this. This is going to be very important. So a while ago, we studied that alpha, so let's find the Greek letters. We studied that alpha is the allowable error. At that time, we said that it's the allowable type 1 error, but from now on, we will only be studying type 1 error, and if nothing is mentioned by default, we are considering the type 1 error. So alpha is the allowable type 1 error, or just the allowable error. And P, the big P, that's what they were asking us about. That is equal to the actual error determined by your whatever work you are doing by experience, let's say, or the experiment. All right, so P is the actual error. Let's see if we can answer the question there. Based on that, we may need some more. P-value is the value used to designate the area alpha. No, alpha and P are two different things. P-value is the probability of observing a sample statistic as extreme or more extreme. A p-value is the number of standard, so it's not the number of standard deviations. So right now, this is the correct answer. P is the probability of observing a sample statistic as extreme or more extreme in an observe than the one observed under the assumption that the statement in the null hypothesis is true. So let's talk a bit about what this is really saying. So in the picture, Remember we said that we can have 3 types of tests: right-tailed, left-tailed, or two-tailed. Now suppose we have a situation of a right-tailed test. So the picture looks like this. Stylus pen. Okay. All right. Let's say this is our normal curve, and alpha will be on the right tail test. Alpha will be some area in the right tail. So let's say this is alpha. And in order to reject the null hypothesis, the P should be less than alpha. So your P should be having a picture like this. So if we get this kind of situation that the P is less than alpha, so P is the red area, so in this situation, the actual error you are getting, which is the P, is less than alpha. And this will be the situation where you will reject the null. So you will reject the null if P is less than alpha. So let's go back. So you will reject the null if P is less than alpha. So in other words, P then tells you what they were saying over there, that it's the probability of observing a sample value as extreme, which is here, or even more extreme. So as you go further out towards into the P area, you get more and more extreme values, because as you go towards the tail, you get towards the extreme values. So that's what they were saying over there, that P is the probability of observing a sample statistic as extreme or more extreme than the one observed under the assumption that the statement in the null hypothesis is true. Okay. So what's the criteria for rejecting null hypothesis using p-value approach? So we just mentioned that. We reject the null if P is less than alpha, this one. If P is less than alpha, then we reject the null. And that's very important. This will be used, in fact, for the rest of this course, not just for the rest of this section and the rest of this chapter, but also in chapter 11, which is the last chapter. So extremely important, just memorize this. If P is less than alpha, you reject the null, or reject the null if P is less than alpha.